Okay, well, thank you. And I'll just introduce myself briefly. My name is Neil Murray, and I'm an educator, a teacher. I teach high school over in Pine Plains, military history and U.S. history. I'm a collector, so I like to collect military antiques. I'm a reenactor and a historian. And tonight I'm also representing the Ancient Order of Hibernians and the Irish Cultural Center. And tonight, what we're going to do is talk about the old 69th, which would eventually become the 165th New York Infantry. But I'll just give you a brief kind of snapshot of the regiment's history. But the main focus of my talk is the material culture, which is the things that they had. So what did they wear? What were the weapons that they used? The equipment that they had as they were deployed with our troops over during World War One. So the old 69th, as it was sometimes called, is referring to the 69th New York, which dates back to the Civil War. And the 69th was part of the famous Irish Brigade. So the regiment, if we're talking about the Civil War period, or for that matter here in World War One, consisted mostly of New York Irish soldiers. And it's interesting that their Civil War fame with a famous and dashing commander, General Marr, during the Civil War, and a famous chaplain, William Corby. As we talk about World War One, they had a dashing commander as well, Bill Donovan, who they also called him Wild Bill, and another famous chaplain, Father Duffy. And some of you might be familiar with Father Duffy. He's actually the most decorated chaplain in American history, and was even approached to command combat troops and not be the chaplain. And Father Duffy, he was from Hell's Kitchen, so there Duffy Square in Times Square, where the big statue is. That's Father Duffy. So an interesting unit history. So the old 69th becomes the 165th Infantry Regiment, and they're part of the National Guard and are assigned to the 42nd Division, which was known as the Rainbow Division. And they were referred to as the Rainbow Division because they drew units from 26 states. So it wasn't kind of one specific region. And if you really dive into the history of the unit itself, it's fascinating. There's a wonderful book called Duffy's War. And it's not just about Father Duffy, but it looks at the regiment through the eyes of this famous chaplain. And we see the regiment fighting in some of the toughest of World War One, Meuse-Argonne offensive, among others. But also the book, I really would recommend it for those of you that are interested. The relationship between the regiment and this Irish heritage is one that they had to fight for. They wanted to keep it distinctly Irish. And Father Duffy was a big supporter of that. And there are stories of when they started to allow, I believe it was Alabama, don't quote me on that one, some soldiers from the South, I guess, let's say, who started to infiltrate the regiment. The New York Irishmen did not like that, nor did the Southerners like being mixed together. So interesting that here we are, World War One, and we still see that friction between North and South. And another interesting thing to consider and think about when we talk about the Irish Brigade of the Civil War, they were a segregated unit. Much like the as they called them at the time, colored troops. Nobody wanted the Irish in their regiments, so they had their own. So born out of that, we see the 165th in World War One taking pride in being a distinctly New York Irish regiment. So that's kind of just a very, very brief synopsis of the unit. But as I said, my talk is much more about what did these soldiers have? What did they wear? And I'll do my best in this virtual setting to share as much as I can. I'll try to stand up and back up a little bit. So I guess let's start with what's on my head. So this is a campaign hat, and it looks much like a Canadian. I'm struggling for the words, but anyway, like the Canadian hat. But it was called a campaign hat, and the tassels here are blue for infantry. So blue tassels would be infantry, yellow would be cavalry, red would be artillery. But we're talking here about the 165th, which was an infantry regiment. So that's what this represents. And these campaign hats, although they kind of look nice, they're not really practical. They can get crushed, and they're expensive to produce. So when they started to raise large numbers of troops and began to then send them over to France, they shifted from the campaign hat to an overseas cap. So this is an overseas cap. And the button here says US for United States, but that's actually an original button, and I should have mentioned that. So that hat's a reproduction. This overseas cap is a reproduction, but the button is original. And you would wear that like this. So that's what the overseas cap would look like. So I'll leave that on for a little bit as we talk a little more. The shirt I'm wearing is wool, and this is a model 1916 issued wool shirt. So just the standard issued shirt. The pants that they would have worn, and I'll show you those. And I didn't put them on. I figured I'd have to like stand up on a chair for you to see it. So I figured I would hold them up and talk a little bit about them. But these, the tunic we're going to look at, and these were called breeches, were designed in 1917. So there's the front, and let's see if I can stand up a little bit. They do flare out right at your hip, and then come down to just above your knee. Or I should say, it's just a little bit below your knee, excuse me. And you would tighten them right here around your leg. And then you would wrap what are called puttees around your leg. And I'll show you a picture of what all that looks like on in a moment. But these are puttees. They are wool. So it's just a giant, big, long wool, almost like an ace bandage that you would wrap tightly around your leg so that the gap between the breeches, which came down just below your knee, and your boots could be tightly covered up so that you wouldn't get dirt and debris or anything like that into your boots. And these puttees are actually original. So those are over 100 years old. And believe it or not, well, I shouldn't say believe it or not, because you probably do believe it. They are better than the reproduction ones that you can buy for reenactments. So I have a few pairs of originals. They work much better than the reproductions. So just to give you a quick look at what it looks like on your legs. Let's see if you can see that picture. There we go. All right, so you can see how tightly wrapped they are. And this picture was actually taken at the Rhinebeck Aerodrome, which I'm sure many of you have been there. All right, now the belt. This is what the belt looks like to hold up your breeches. So it just has a simple brass buckle on it. And the boots. So these are model 1917 trench boots. And these are reproductions. So that's what the boot looks like. And there's the bottom. Okay, so you have heel plate and hobnails because the bottom is leather, as is the entire boot itself. So that helps you from wear, so it doesn't wear out as much, right? And these, like I said, these are reproductions, and they are miserably uncomfortable to wear these. All right, now let's see the tunic. So what you would wear over the top of your wool shirt is this here, this tunic, and this I'll put on in a moment. I want to show you the buttons on here. Okay, so instead of US, has NY for New York, and then here, I don't know if you can see that, it has cross rifles and 69 for 69th New York Infantry. Now the buttons on this, buttons are actually original on this coat. So the buttons that came, it's a reproduction coat. I do have some original coats, but the buttons that came with the coat didn't really look right. So I was able to get some reproduction buttons to make the coat look a little bit more authentic. And this is what you'd wear in combat, but also for parades. So for the last few years, I was fortunate to be able to march in the Veterans Parade in New York City for the 100th commemoration of World War I. And this is what we wore in the parade. Okay, now this is gonna be a little hard to do, but so this would button also. And it really would depend on, I suppose, your regimental commander and how serious or your company commander, they were about how you should look in combat. You know, if you were under the command of George Patton, who we are familiar with, he would want you to have this thing buttoned up and you have to look perfect. Others might let you loosen it up and be a little bit more comfortable. But this is made out of wool also. Okay. Now let's shift a little bit and take a look at the helmet. So if you give me a quick second to take this off. All right. So the famous Doughboy helmet. Okay. Now the shell is original. So this is a real World War I era shell. There's a company that reproduces the liner and can put them on original shells. So although the shell is original, the liner is a reproduction, and it has very little padding. And you can see here, this little net webbing is how you adjust it so it doesn't rest right on top of your head. And the way you would wear it, you take the chin strap here and you put it right there. So it doesn't go all the way under your chin like this. It would sit right there, and it holds the helmet on your head tighter. And it's important to remember, World War I is the first war that the United States fights in that we are wearing helmets. And you know, just like World War II, contrary to maybe popular belief, this does not stop a bullet. It would be for flying debris, rocks, and things of that nature that might hit you in the head. So this is an original helmet. Okay. Now, shifting over to the gear. So what would they wear? And what did the cartridge belt and that sort of equipment look like? So let me show you first. You know what? Let's take a look at this. All right. Okay. So this is a gas mask bag. And the way you would wear this, it would be worn in the front. And you would actually keep it open, and I'll show you why in a moment. So you'd wear the gas mask bag tied to your chest like so. And the reason being was, if you were under a gas attack, you could reach into the bag quickly, pull out the mask, put the mask on, and put your helmet back on. And that's how you would be protected under a gas attack. And you can actually see pretty well. And believe it or not, they actually had anti-dimming cream that you would put on there so it wouldn't fog up. And then there's the inside, and it has actually a little mouthpiece. And then in the bag is a little canister, which is where your filter would be. So there's the filter. Now, this is a reproduction. I do have an original it's marked to the 27th division, not the 42nd. But when you have an original, you don't want to put that in your mouth, because as crazy as this sounds, there could still be gases in the filter, which is pretty interesting to think about. And then on the front, the 3, that's the size. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how big your head and your face was. And I have a picture that I'll show you. Let's see here. So you can see the gas mask, the bag, and then that's actually a good picture also showing the flare on the breeches. See how that kind of comes out like that and then comes in nice and tight? And that would have been the style of that era. All right, let's see. Now I'm going to put this hat back on so you don't get the glare off my head. Okay, so the gas mask bag is worn on the front. Your cartridge belt. So this is what your cartridge belt would look like. And the cartridge belt itself, so this part right here, that's original from 1917. The canteen, which we'll talk about in a second, and the first aid pouch, those are reproductions. And in each pouch would carry 5 rounds. So you could have a total of, 5 per, so 10. You could carry 50 rounds in your cartridge belt. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not, but you see that marking there? So right where my finger is, it says 1918. All right, so this is original and still has that nice marking on it. So that's where you would carry your ammunition. First aid. So inside your first aid pouch is a little first aid kit. Had a little key on the back. So when you would pull this tab open, in it would be a little bit of medical dressing and just a bandage. The canteen is made out of tin. So that's canteen. All right, and that's an original canteen also. And the cartridge belt itself, give me a moment. I'll put it on so you can see what that looks like. Just putting all this stuff back in. Okay. There we go. That's what it looked like on. So first aid, canteen. All right, now if you were an officer, then you carry your pistol, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, and your web belt would be different. It would look like this because you're not necessarily carrying a rifle, so you wouldn't have those long rounds. Notice. So US in the brown or russet color. Black would be Vietnam. So World War I, World War II, and Vietnam, same style holster because we're using the same pistol, which is the model 1911. But in World War I and World War II, they were brown. Vietnam is when they are black. Okay. Sometimes officers would carry a little personal articles bag like this one. And notice how they all have these clips. So the reason they call it web gear is because it's kind of like webbing, but you can hook these into these grommets. You can see how the holster's hooked on. So everything's kind of interchangeable, if you will, where you can piece things together. So an officer might carry one of these personal articles bags like this one. And this is also original. So this is surplus. You can tell it almost looks new, but it actually is original. So I don't know if you can see the date in there, 1918. All right. Let's see. Now your haversack. I'm going to show you an original haversack, and then we'll move over to a reproduction haversack. So an original haversack. So this is an original haversack, and I'll show you one in a moment that has the equipment attached to it. But what would go right here would be your shovel, and the shovel carrier would hang down. You can see it says US, and on the inside, this one was made in 1918. All right, so that's original. And then here, this is where you would keep your rations, your blanket, any additional clothing you might have. So it opens up like that and then drops down. So you would lay this flat and put and I'll show you the things that go in here in a moment. Your baking can, your bread tin, your condiment can, your blanket, and then you would close it up. And this is what it looks like all together. So that goes on your back. The cartridge belt connects to these clips. So those would connect through those grommets. So when you put this on your back, then you would have your cartridge belt in the front. And taking a look at some of the things that are in here. So the shovel disconnects this strap. All right, and this is a reproduction of what the shovels would have looked like. So as I always tell my students, what did the shovels look like when they dug the trenches? They look like that. All right. Here, bayonet. Oh, drop it down a little bit, and I'll show you how that goes on the rifle in a few minutes. Here, this is where you would keep your utensils and your meat can, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then inside are some of these other condiments that we'll take a look at in a second. So the meat can looks like this. So in that pouch, you would find this. This is an original. This one is 1918. So it might be a little bit hard to see. Oh yeah, there you go, 1918. And then so there's for cooking. Utensils made out of tin. And these are also original. And you can see, let's see. So US, so there's the US on the spoon. US on the fork. So they're all marked US. And this one's actually dated. So US. And on this side, 1917. All right, so that's an original. Okay, your bacon can. And it's for bacon. So in here you would keep your bacon rations. And these were known as the model of 1916, or just called bacon can. And this is, as I said, is an original. So you can see model of 1916. I don't have any bacon in there, but that's what the inside would look like. Also made out of tin. All right. Now, your bread can, bread tin would look like this. This is a reproduction. Originals are extremely hard to come by because these would have been disposable. And basically what you would do is once you opened it, there would be essentially a sleeve of saltine crackers. So it wasn't really bread, but it would have been saltine crackers that would have been in these cans. And let's see, I guess I gotta put that on later. But the end here, cut this end out. So you would literally cut it like as if you were opening up a can of beans, and then pull out your sleeve of saltines. And on the bottom, they called it hard bread. Okay. We've also carried emergency rations in another little can. So this is a reproduction, but you can see it says U.S. Army emergency ration. And they actually had condiments, believe it or not. And this is an original condiment can. So on one side you would have coffee, on the other side usually sugar, or maybe salt. And these open. And they didn't connect, so you had a spot for 2 condiments, and that one's original also. So move that over to here. Anybody, you guys have any questions so far? I mean, there's only 3 of us, so if you have a question, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
First of all, I'm amazed that this is from 100 years ago. And now you look at the equipment that our soldiers have today, all this high-tech equipment, and it's unbelievable how different it is.
Sure, absolutely. It's nice as a living historian, and there's actually a place down in Pennsylvania near Gettysburg called Newville. and it is the largest trench system for reenactors. My understanding is in the world. There are people who fly in from Europe to come to this place for the reenactment. And it's interesting that a lot of reenactors like myself, we want to use as much original equipment as possible, to the largest extent that you can without ruining original stuff. So I use these because they're better than the reproductions that you can buy. But yes, absolutely. You think about the equipment that our soldiers have today, and that the horrors of World War I, and then this is what they were living with. Sure.
Right. No body armor, the helmet wouldn't even stop a bullet,
Oh,
nothing.
no. And even on that note, I'm going to show you something that was the opposite of body armor and why they didn't use it. So this is a grenade. This is for carrying grenades. And this is actually original. And it looks like it's brand new because they quickly got rid of these. So the opposite of body armor, you would actually wear this on your chest, right? Full of grenades. Well, what happens when somebody shoots one of the grenades? You're done. So they quickly got rid of these. But this one, I believe, this is 1918.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's original.
And hi, honey. I'm saying hi to my husband.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Well, let me I'll run through the rest of the stuff that I have, and then we can talk a little bit more and make it a little less formal, I suppose, since it's virtual and there's only the two of you. I don't mean only, but just a small group. So, let me show you this. So a little leisure. The U.S. Army actually issued baseball gloves. This is not an original baseball glove, but it is an authentic reproduction. There's a company called Shoeless Joe that makes historic baseball gloves. And this one, they put a date on it. So it's what you would have expected in 1910. It wouldn't have had this emblem, but they're really the only company that makes ones you can actually use. And when I play catch with my sons, I actually use this. It's fun. So you can see how there's no webbing at all, except for right here. So much different, obviously, even than the World War II, 1940s, 1950s era baseball glove. So they did play baseball, which is kind of neat. Other clothing. So this is called a jerkin, which is this nice leather vest, which was just for warmth. So you can see on the inside, it's wool. And has 4 buttons. And you would actually wear this over your tunic. But essentially it would look the same as what you're seeing here with just the tunic collar. So leather jerkin. They had raincoats. So I'll show you a raincoat. So this would actually be worn over the top of that pack. So if you had the pack on, the pack would go underneath and the raincoat goes over the top. And the clips, I don't know if you can see that, slip through like so. So they did have raincoats, and it's almost like a cotton duck. It's kind of like a rubbery feel to it. And there's the inside of that. Give me a moment to take that off. The raincoat actually works, and the reason I like to get involved in reenactments is for research purposes, and I readily admit there are some guys out there that are better off, I suppose, playing paintball, but that's not why I like reenacting. I want to experience what the clothing and what the gear feels like in different settings. And anybody, any historian or any reenactor that tells you that you can duplicate actual combat is lying. That's impossible. We know at the end of the day, it's a reenactment, but what can you duplicate? What does it feel like in the rain? What does it feel like to be in the trench? What does it feel like eating out of, the meat can? Those are experiences that you can duplicate. And as fate would have it, the first time I went down to Newville, As soon as the reenactment began, it started to pour rain. And I remember hearing the rain plinking off of my helmet as I stood there in the raincoat. And it was a very, very surreal and realistic feeling. But anyway, the point that I was trying to make was the raincoat, it worked. So wearing it over the top of my gear and my blanket and everything that I was going to need for the next 2 days, it kept me dry. I remember it was just the end of my sleeves that got wet. Everything else was okay. I have an original blanket that I'll show you. So that's just an example of an original blanket, so a wool blanket. And you can see, you find surplus Army blankets like this all around. Sometimes in Goodwill or consignment type shops. But this is a World War I example. Has a little bit lighter green color to it. Okay, and then what I think I'll do, I'll show you the weapons that they would have used, and then I'll let you ask some questions and we can just chat for whatever time we have left. Okay, so we'll start with the pistol. So an officer would carry a model 1911 U.S. Army pistol. It's a 45 caliber, and this one's actually an original. So this one was made in 1917, and you can see here it says model of 1911 U.S. Army. And then on this side, it has the Colt. This is a Colt markings on it, and this might be hard to see. Right by my finger, it says United States property. I don't know if you can see that. But a very effective, deadly, powerful sidearm that the U.S. Army uses from 1911 until the 1980s. So World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, same gun. And the way it would work, so you have a 7-round magazine. This is also an original magazine, which would be loaded with 45 caliber ammunition. And you could load it very quickly. So essentially what you would do is, and I'm gonna show you it's not loaded, right? So we're just talking. See, right? You can see through, okay. Imagine this is loaded. Once you put this in, now it's ready to fire. Okay, you can see that the hammer is back. That's all it takes. Every time you pull the trigger, bang, as fast as you can pull the trigger 7 times, then what would happen is it would stay open like that so that you knew it was empty. Take out your magazine, put another one in, that quick, and you're ready to go again. So very, very effective. Okay. Early on in the war, they would have been using a model 1903 Springfield. So this was made at Springfield Armory. It's chambered in 30-06, which would have been the same caliber that would have been used in World War I, World War II, and the early stages of Vietnam. A lot of people still hunt with a 30-06. And typically for collectors, this is usually the most popular of the rifles because they like the way it looks. But contrary to popular belief, most soldiers in the 165th would not have been carrying a 1903. I'll show you the one that they would have been carrying in a moment. But it is bolt action. So what you would do is you would reach into the cartridge belt that we talked about before and pull out a cartridge, which would have had 5 rounds on it, on what they called a stripper clip. All right, so you would put the clip here and then push your finger and push the rounds in and then pull out this little piece of metal that the bullets were attached to. Close that, and now it's ready to go. Bang. Bang. 7 times, or excuse me, 5 times. And then you are ready to load it again. And I'll try to show you some of the markings on this. So this is original. Let's see, can you see that? I don't know if that's working, is it? A little bit. I don't know if you can see Springfield Armory. Okay. Now, what most soldiers would be equipped with is this rifle. And this is modeled after the British Enfield. Some people refer to it as an Enfield. The correct terminology is the model, US model of 1917. And it is also bolt action. And it shoots the same exact round as the 1903. You would load it exactly the same way. Still a 5-round magazine. And I'll show you the markings in a moment. And I think with collectors, and even the soldiers at the time, this just isn't as nice. For whatever reason, this is a rifle that wasn't very desirable for collectors. And soldiers, even at the time, liked the way the 1903 looked. The vast majority of them would have been equipped with this. And I'll show you the markings here. I don't know if you're able to see that or not. You guys see that? There we go. Something just popped up on my screen. Let's see. Remind me later. Oh, what just happened?
We can still see you.
Oh, okay. See
Um,
what happened here. I'm gonna start Xing out of stuff. Good thing I didn't start cursing. There we go. I got it.
okay.
All right. There we go. Thanks. All right. Anyway, so that's what I was trying to do. There, you can see it. It's a U.S. model of 1917. Now, Eddystone was a sister company to Remington. So these model 1917s were made by Remington, Winchester, and Eddystone, which are all private contractors. So that's an interesting conversation in and of itself. The other rifle I showed you was made by Springfield Armory, which is U.S. government. These were private companies which would have had contracts with the government, just like Colt. Colt was designed by John Browning, or the 1911 was designed by John Browning, but Colt produced them, and then Colt, private company, had those contracts with the U.S. government. Right. Put this down here. Okay. Well, do you have any questions?
I have a question about the rifle. So the one that you said was more desirable for collectors, did soldiers have a preference? And if so, why? Does one of them have a better feel, or does one of them, are they?
My understanding is that the soldiers themselves did not have a preference in World War I. In World War II, I know we see the 1903s, which would have been produced at that point by Remington with the Marines on Guadalcanal. That was their preference at the time. I think it was their preference until they felt the M1 Grand semi-automatic and much more efficient. So to answer your question, I think during World War I don't think that preference was there. I don't know definitively, but I know it's definitely there for collectors. For whatever reason, the 1903s are much more desirable. And the one I showed you, that one's really old. That one's 1908. So that would have been produced in 1908. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. So the receiver, which is this part right here, 1908. The stock is 1908, but the barrel is 1917. So this would have been rebuilt, and it would have already been, I don't want to say old or outdated, but for lack of a better way of saying it, old and outdated. By World War I, they would have already had to, renovate it, I suppose, and then issue it back to troops. So the barrel on this one is 1917. That's probably not going to come out. No. But the other rifle, the entirety of it was made in 1917. Other questions?
And Neil, the 69th Irish, besides the fact that they were almost exclusively Irish and from New York, were there any other sort of regional specialties? Did you have, were they all from the city? Were they all from upstate? Where did they come from?
Good question. The vast majority of them are New York City. However, my understanding is that, were from the Hudson Valley, and had roots in New York City or were of Irish descent, whether it be, a lot of these guys were first generation Irish Americans,
Sure.
whereas the soldiers from the Civil War would have been the immigrant themselves. You could have enlisted in the 165th and not, let's say, the soldiers of the 27th Division, which is really what we find more up here. The muster lists and lists of soldiers and where they enlisted, and that's pretty available. So I guess to answer your question, vast majority is New York City, and some from the Hudson Valley area.
Mhm.
So, and there's even friction between the New York City soldiers and the soldiers from up here. And not just in the 165th. I mean, if you take a look at a lot of the soldiers in the 27th Division, also, they called the New York City guys called the guys from the Hudson Valley apple knockers, which was kind of like a dumb farmer is basically what that translates to. So there was even that kind of little animosity between New York City and the Hudson Valley. So we can only imagine, what it would have felt like where, we have this proud Irish regiment, and then we have Southerners that are starting to enlist in it. And they're if you read Duffy's War, Father Duffy talks about how he's essentially counseling guys like, no, they're on our side. You can't do that. I know I don't really like them either, but we got to accept them. It's pretty interesting to hear his mediation of that.
And did the apple knockers have a nickname for the city guys?
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't heard one in particular. I'm guessing possibly the aggressive nature of the tough guys from 10th Avenue maybe overshadowed the farm boys. I don't know, but I haven't heard.
They don't call it Hell's Kitchen for nothing. All right,
exactly. Yes. So and where Father Duffy talks also about remembering some of the soldiers in the regiment as kids, baptizing some of them, marrying some of them after the war. Some of them serving as altar boys, altar servers for him before the war, and how he felt such joy in some instances where some of the guys survived the war and he's able to marry them, but then also, this sorrow as he's on the battlefield reading the last rites to a soldier that he remembers as a kid. So he really struggled with that, and you can get a sense of that in his writing.
I can't wait to order his book now from my favorite library.
Yeah, there you go. Duffy's War. There's another one I think called Duffy's Story, Father Duffy's Story, I believe. One is like his kind of autobiography, just about that he wrote about him. It's all his memoir. Duffy's War talks about Bill Donovan and the regiment itself through his eyes. So I would recommend Duffy's War because that'll give you a more concise history as opposed to specifically about him. Other questions? I don't know what button I put there. So
I don't have a question, but
yep.
This is usual for me. So we had all of the canteen, the bacon box, it was from my grandfather, World War I. I just know his grave says artillery. I honestly, beyond that, I don't know. I know that he was actually injured in the war in some percussive explosion and broke ribs that pierced his lungs, but they never did anything about it. They just taped him up, and then years later, he died at 70. When they did an autopsy, they said, wow, this was from an injury in World War I.
Oh, wow.
But he lived till 70. But long story short, I have the canteen. I have the mess kit. We even had bandages. I guess they were they were in wax packages. We would never open them because nobody was ever injured, but they were totally waxed in. Yeah. I don't know where those are either. We had the little medical kit we never opened. I took all this stuff camping when I was a kid. That's what I used. I used my grandfather's canteen, my grandfather's, little fry pan kit, mess kit.
Yeah.
And all of that. Now I don't know where it is. I got to look.
Yeah, that's neat. And a common thing, I mean, even Army Navy stores, they don't exist anymore. And if they do, if you run into them, they're usually kind of knockoff stuff, not really surplus anymore. But I remember when I was a kid at Army Navy stores, we were buying Vietnam surplus, and then every generation, before.
Right.
But that's really neat. Yeah. I've seen canteen covers and mess tins that are stamped like Boy Scouts. So the Boy Scouts during the era after each one of those wars would have purchased and then used the surplus military items. I don't know if you're familiar with Francis Bannerman, the military goods.
Oh, the castle.
Yeah. So Bannerman had a store in Manhattan before they got so big that they moved all their stuff up to the castle, but they were notorious for buying up surplus everything and even rifles and just piecing things together and selling them on the civilian market, not as a collectible, but as a hunting rifle or a marksmanship type rifle. And, as a collector myself and the groups that I'm with, we encounter, they call them Bannerman, like, Frankenstein rifles all the time, where you'll see pieces from a Spanish American War era rifle that they just put together with a 1903, and then it's got a 1917 bolt on it. And again, at the time, no one's thinking about, well, somebody might want to collect these someday. It was just, you need something to go hunting. But anyway, back to your point and comment there, Bannerman would have sold a lot of this surplus stuff to Boy Scout units and,
Yeah.
campers and so on.
It could be in my mother's basement. I don't know. Now I got to look.
Yeah, definitely. Save it. That's good.
I know.
It's in the garage. I
Is
remember
it?
seeing it. Yeah, I remember seeing it.
Oh, okay.
And Neil, I wanted to ask you too, of all of the things that you collect as a reenactor and as a historian and a teacher, what is the hardest thing to find? What is the most obscure and difficult collectible from that era?
From World War I?
Yeah.
I would say
The cracker.
Yep,
That one.
the bread tin, because these were disposable. You're not gonna once you took your, I keep calling them saltines, but your hard bread, which is saltine cracker basically. Once you took it out, it's disposable. They would just pitch them. So I would say this.
Right. So
What else is
they're
out there?
buried on the battlefield somewhere,
Right.
or rotted now on the battlefield, but not a lot of collectors.
They're
And
gone.
Exactly.
soldiers only eat meat and crackers? That seems like an unhealthy diet for a soldier.
They had a bacon box. There was bacon.
Yeah. In the frontline trenches, that would have been, the ration. So think of that as, if we're talking about Vietnam, you're on a patrol. But they did not keep you in the frontline trenches. I believe it was a week, kind of like on a rotation. Simply put, you're going to lose your mind. So they would kind of rotate you back, and then as you were in some of the supply trenches, the Salvation Army was there. So they did have some fresh vegetables, as readily available as they would have been at whatever point. But they did have other things, beans, corned beef, like canned corned beef. Not, I would say corned beef hash, but not canned corned beef, canned tomatoes. So a lot of canned stuff. I shouldn't have said vegetables, but canned vegetables. But they did have them. But still not very good. When I do a lot of living history experiences with my students, and we do one at the aerodrome set in World War I, and it's interesting watching their faces when they say what's for lunch, and I say canned corned beef and canned tomato, and then hand them this. And a can opener, but which, by the way, they don't know how to use. And I watch them trying to open it up with a can opener. It's great.
With the little key, yeah.
That's right. You got to go all around,
The
right?
little key.
Yep. Now I give a little demo 1 year. Whoosh, I'm like, oh, okay, this is how you do it.
My dad was in World War II in the South Pacific, and I guess some of their rations the Australians provided, and it was canned mutton. And he's, till the day he died, he would go, "I'll never look at a tin of canned mutton again in my life." He said you'd open the can and it would just smell awful, like from the minute you opened it.
Interesting for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that's the most elusive that I've seen on the collector's market. And it's desirability also. Swords and guns are the most desirable, usually the most highly collectible, most valuable. But you can find, like I said, this is an original helmet. They're out there. You can find original uniforms. I have a few original uniforms. But I would say that's probably the one that's the most difficult in World War I era to find.
Nicole and I actually took a class. It was firing historic guns. You remember that? It was out on Long Island, and again, I'm not a big shooter, but it was interesting. We did it as a Christmas thing, and my daughter came. But you actually got to fire all different era, all rifles.
Oh, that's neat. I for the past few years, they canceled it last year, and I don't believe they're having it again this year. I was fortunate to be able to work with the history department at the military academy at West Point, and I also do Civil War reenacting, and they do a program very similar. Where the history department comes in, and we go to the range, and they shoot historic weapons from the Revolution, Civil War, World War I, World War II, and then right up, and then they have a discussion on the how weapons dictate tactics and so on. And I've been fortunate to work with them with the Civil War muskets that they shoot with live rounds, not with blanks.
Right.
And then they give us the opportunity to shoot some of the things that I guess the common people don't get to shoot, like the Tommy guns and Browning automatic machine guns, and it's very, very eye-opening. Again, in a different way, but similar in a sense to living history, experiencing the rain, and then you feel the power of these weapons, and then kind of connecting the two, and thinking about tactically and strategically. It's very, very scholarly, I suppose. Shoot, if you will. But anyway, that's neat that you got to experience that.
Yeah.
All those that I showed you, those all can fire. In my own personal collection, I kind of have one that's nice and that I don't shoot, and then one that can shoot, but also just on a special occasion. They're all antiques.
Yeah. I think it was called Renaissance Firearms or something. I still get an email every once in a while from them.
Okay, neat. I'll have to check that out. Thanks.
Ammunition for those firearms?
Wait, you're muted.
Oh.
No,
Can you
come closer.
Can you use modern ammunition in those firearms?
You can. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You just have to be careful. Like the 1911 I showed you, that's too valuable. I don't shoot that one. But if you do, you just usually use like a light load, not a heavy hunting, powerful, cartridge, just a light load, I suppose. And I don't know, the 1917 I've shot, and that one you can just shoot regular ammunition through it. But
And
even
how about the 45?
What's that?
And how about the 45?
You could. I have a reproduction 45 that feels exactly the same. So my kind of rationale is that's a over 100-year-old antique. Well, one mistake and something breaks, and so the feeling of it is going to be exactly the same as if you're using a reproduction. So that's kind of why I don't shoot that one. I'm sure it's absolutely fine, and it's probably better than the modern ones, but that one is pretty valuable. So that one I just keep the safe.
Yeah. There was an Italian company, I don't know if they do it anymore, but years ago, and they would make a lot of the reproductions.
Pedersoli?
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, from like 6 shooters to
Yep. All the quality reproductions, a lot of them are made in Italy. Cimarron is another one. Uberti. Yeah. They make a lot of the quality reproductions. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I hope this was interesting for you.
It was great.
It was
excellent. Thank you.
Like everything else in the world we live in now, it would have been a lot better if I was standing in front of you and putting stuff on. But I try to do the best that I could for you and make it engaging. And it's only 2 of you, a little informal, but that's okay.
That was terrific. It
Yeah,
was
no,
really good.
I thought you did a great job. We appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. And I hope the informality didn't mess up your recording, but
Not at all. No, that's what's interesting.
And when you-
Good.
and I'm gonna cut you off. So feel free if you have a few more questions that you want to ask. That's fine.
I just had one question. If you had everything on, if you're the soldiers that were there, that you're wearing everything, you're carrying everything, how much does it weigh? How much are you like lugging around?
Like 50 pounds.
Okay.
So here's what the pack looks like on. I forget if I showed you that picture or not.
Okay.
So that's everything on. And then
Including 50 pounds.
I showed you that one. And then here's this one again here, so you can see.
Mhm.
Even the canteen. I mean, fill a canteen full of water.
Right.
That's like 3-4 pounds right there.
Yeah.
The ammunition. I think I might have been on the low side when I said 50 pounds. I'm gonna maybe say 75 pounds. When everything's on. So
Wow.
Yeah. So if it's hot out, you're carrying that. You're wearing wool.
if it's hot out, if it's cold out, you're same equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was something that took some getting used to when I first started reenacting. I remember thinking, I can't wear that wool. And I do Revolutionary War reenacting also. But you get used to it. Your body does adjust, and wool is a natural fiber, so it does breathe. It's very warm. It does dry. So it's not as bad as you would think, but it's not comfortable either.
Down to Greenwood Cemetery to do their Revolutionary War reenactment.
Where's that?
Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn.
Oh no, I've never been to that one.
It's beautiful. They have
Oh,
the
neat.
horses and the tents. It's
Oh,
a
cool.
very exciting day of living history.
Oh, neat. Thanks for sharing. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having the
Neil.
program.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yes, everyone does. Bye, honey.
Right.
Bye.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good night, everybody.
You
Good
too,
night,
Brian.
thanks.
Thank
All right,
you. And
thank you
the
so much,
Playful
Neil.
Library.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay. Good night.